Have you ever noticed that toxic coworkers almost never start with a huge attack? It usually begins with something much smaller, a sarcastic comment during a meeting, a joke at your expense that everyone is expected to laugh at, an unnecessary criticism disguised as feedback, or a dismissive remark that leaves you questioning whether you're overreacting. Most people respond in one of two ways. They either stay silent because they don't want to create conflict, or they become emotional and start defending themselves. Unfortunately, both reactions often lead to the same outcome. The behavior continues. Because here's something many professionals don't realize until it's too late. Disrespect grows wherever it is tolerated. Every time someone gets away with crossing your boundaries, they become a little more comfortable doing it again. Before long, what started as one rude comment becomes a pattern that slowly damages your confidence, your reputation, and even your career. But here's the good news. You don't have to become aggressive. You don't have to argue. And you definitely don't have to play office politics better than they do. Sometimes, all it takes is saying the right sentence at the right moment. Not louder, not angrier, just smarter. The most respected professionals in any workplace rarely win through intimidation. They earn respect because they know how to interrupt toxic behavior without sacrificing their professionalism. Today, I'm going to share 3 powerful phrases that can completely change the dynamic between you and a difficult coworker. These aren't clever comebacks designed to embarrass someone. They're carefully structured responses that force the other person to confront their own behavior while allowing you to remain calm, confident, and in control. You'll also learn why your body language often speaks louder than your words, why silence can become one of your strongest professional tools, and how a simple question can instantly shift the pressure back onto someone who's trying to undermine you. If you've ever left work wishing you had handled a conversation differently, if you've ever replayed an awkward interaction in your head all evening, or if you're simply tired of dealing with disrespectful people who think they can get away with anything, then stay with me until the end. One of these 3 phrases may completely change the way people treat you at work. And before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever worked with a toxic coworker who constantly pushed your boundaries? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else realize they're not dealing with this alone. 1. The real reason toxic coworkers keep targeting the same people. One of the biggest myths about toxic coworkers is that they only go after people who are weak. That isn't true. In fact, many highly intelligent, talented, and hardworking professionals become their favorite targets. The difference isn't confidence, it's accessibility. Think about it this way. A burglar doesn't usually choose the house with the strongest security system. They look for the one with the unlocked door. Toxic people operate in much the same way. They're constantly paying attention to who lets disrespect slide, who laughs off inappropriate comment, who apologizes even when they haven't done anything wrong, who immediately explains themselves every time they're questioned, and who seems uncomfortable creating even the smallest amount of tension. These behaviors send a silent message. This person probably won't challenge me. The interesting part is that most toxic coworkers aren't consciously planning every interaction. Many simply repeat behaviors that have worked for them before. If sarcasm earns them attention, if intimidation gives them influence, if passive-aggressive comments allow them to feel superior, why would they stop? Especially if nobody ever interrupts the pattern. That's why your goal is never to win an argument. Your goal is to interrupt the cycle. The moment someone realizes that disrespect no longer produces the reaction they expected, the entire interaction changes. Imagine someone makes a cutting remark during a meeting. Most people immediately defend themselves. Others laugh awkwardly to reduce the tension. Some become visibly upset. Every one of those reactions gives the toxic person exactly what they were looking for, a sense of control over your emotional state. But what happens if they don't get that reward? What happens when they encounter someone who remains calm? Someone who refuses to become defensive? Someone who responds with quiet confidence instead of emotional energy? Suddenly, the script they've relied on no longer works. That uncertainty is incredibly uncomfortable for people who depend on manipulation. This is why emotional self-control is one of the most powerful forms of authority you can develop at work. Not because it makes you appear cold, but because it makes you predictable, stable, and difficult to manipulate. People naturally respect those who remain composed under pressure. And toxic people usually move on when they realize they can't easily pull someone into an emotional game. Remember this: your calmness isn't weakness, your silence isn't surrender, and your professionalism should never be mistaken for permission. The moment you stop rewarding toxic behavior with emotional reactions, you've already begun changing the power dynamic even before you say a single word. 2. Your body language speaks before you do. Before we talk about the first powerful phrase, there's something even more important. Your words only work if your presence supports them. Have you ever seen someone say, "I'm fine," while looking nervous, avoiding eye contact, and shrinking into their chair? Nobody believes the words. The same principle applies in the workplace. When dealing with a toxic coworker, people aren't just listening to what you say. They're watching how you say it. Your posture, your facial expression, your voice, even the length of your silence. These signals tell people whether you're confident or uncomfortable long before your actual response begins. That's why the first step isn't speaking. It's positioning yourself. If someone directs an inappropriate comment toward you, resist the instinct to immediately look away, smile nervously, or start explaining yourself. Instead, turn your body to face them naturally. Keep your shoulders relaxed but squared. Lift your chin slightly. Maintain comfortable eye contact without staring aggressively. You're not trying to intimidate anyone. You're simply communicating that you're fully present and completely unshaken. Now let's talk about your voice. Many people unknowingly raise their pitch when they feel pressured. Their sentences become faster. Their breathing becomes shallow. And without realizing it, they sound as though they're asking for permission to be respected. Instead, slow everything down. Take one calm breath before speaking. Lower your pace. Allow small pauses between sentences. A calm, steady voice communicates confidence far more effectively than speaking loudly ever could. One simple exercise can help you practice this. Stand in front of a mirror. Relax your shoulders. Lower your chin just slightly. Then slowly say the words, "I see," not with sarcasm, not with frustration, simply with calm curiosity. Listen to your voice. You're aiming for a tone that sounds grounded, controlled, and impossible to rush. Finally, there's one technique that's surprisingly uncomfortable for the other person: the 2-second pause. When someone makes a disrespectful comment, don't rush to fill the silence. Simply look at them for 2 seconds. That's all. 2 quiet seconds. It may feel like forever to you, but psychologically, silence creates pressure. Many toxic people expect immediate reactions. They expect you to defend yourself, laugh, explain, apologize, or become emotional. When none of that happens, something interesting occurs. They suddenly become aware of their own words. Some will start talking just to fill the silence. Others will soften what they said. Some will even begin explaining themselves without you asking a single question. That's because silence often exposes intentions better than arguments ever can. Think of the pause as pressing a reset button on the conversation. Instead of reacting automatically, you're choosing your response with intention, and that single decision immediately changes the balance of the interaction. Before you ever use one of the 3 phrases you're about to learn, master this first, because confidence isn't only heard, it's seen. And sometimes, it's found in the few seconds when you choose not to speak at all. If you've ever wished you could stay calm instead of thinking of the perfect response 5 minutes later, let me know in the comments. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, "I should have said something"? I'd love to hear your experience. 3. Magic phrase number 1. The power statement. Now that you've learned how to control your body language and your emotional response, it's time for the first phrase. This one is incredibly effective because it doesn't attack the other person. Instead, it quietly forces them to confront the gap between their behavior and the professional environment they're standing in. Imagine you're in a meeting. You present an idea. A coworker smirks and says, "Well, I guess that's one way to do it." The room becomes quiet. Everyone senses the tension. Most people would immediately defend themselves. They'd explain why their idea makes sense, or they'd try to joke their way out of the awkwardness. Instead, take your 2-second pause. Look at them calmly. Then say, "I have to be honest. I'm a little surprised by that comment. I've always viewed our working relationship as professional, and that didn't seem consistent with that." That's it. No accusation, no raised voice, No personal attack. Notice what this statement actually does. You never call them rude. You never label them toxic. You never tell them they were wrong. You simply point out the contrast between the professional standard you expected and the behavior they just displayed. Psychologically, this is powerful because people naturally want their actions to match the image they have of themselves. Most coworkers don't want to be seen as unprofessional, especially in front of others. By calmly highlighting the inconsistency, you're inviting them to correct it on their own. Even if they don't apologize immediately, you've accomplished something important. You've made it clear that their behavior didn't go unnoticed. You've established a boundary without creating unnecessary conflict. This also protects your professional reputation. Think about how the rest of the room experiences the interaction. They don't see someone losing their temper. They don't see an argument. They see one person remaining calm while reinforcing a professional standard. That's exactly the kind of presence people remember. Of course, not every toxic coworker will suddenly change. Some may become defensive. Some may laugh it off. Others may try to change the subject. That's okay. The purpose of this phrase isn't to control their reaction. The purpose is to control yours. When you stop trying to win and start focusing on communicating your standards, something interesting happens. People begin to understand exactly where your boundaries are. And once those boundaries become clear, many repeat offenses simply stop because the social cost becomes much higher. Professional confidence isn't about having the sharpest comeback. It's about creating an environment where disrespect becomes uncomfortable for the person delivering it, not for the person receiving it. That is the true power behind this first phrase. 4. Magic phrase number 2. The power question. Sometimes, making a statement isn't enough. Some people are so accustomed to making sarcastic remarks or subtle insults that they barely think about what they're saying. That's when asking the right question becomes far more powerful than giving the right answer. Imagine a coworker makes a dismissive comment in front of the team. Wow, you're still struggling with that? Everyone hears it. The room becomes uncomfortable. Your first instinct might be to defend yourself or fire back with an equally sarcastic response. Don't. Take your 2-second pause. Maintain steady eye contact. Then ask calmly, "Can I ask what I did that made you feel a comment like that was appropriate between us?" Listen carefully to that question. You're not asking because you don't know the answer. You're asking because you're inviting them to explain their behavior. And that's where the power lies. Up until this moment, they were in control of the conversation. They made the remark. They expected you to react. But now, the spotlight shifts. Instead of defending yourself, you're asking them to justify their actions. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as shifting the burden of explanation. The person who created the tension now has to account for it. In most cases, they'll respond in one of 3 ways. First, they may backtrack. "Oh, I was just kidding." Notice what happened. Without arguing, you've already encouraged them to soften their position. Second, they may try to justify themselves. "I was only being honest." That's useful information. Now everyone can clearly see that the issue isn't your reaction, it's their decision to frame disrespect as honesty. Third, they may simply become quiet. And surprisingly, silence is often the strongest outcome. Because when someone can't explain why they said something, they usually recognize, at least privately, that they crossed a line. This phrase also demonstrates emotional maturity. Confident professionals ask questions. Insecure people rush to conclusions. By remaining curious instead of combative, you're showing that you're interested in understanding, not escalating. There's another reason this question works so well. It forces the other person to think. Most toxic comments are impulsive. They're designed to create an emotional reaction before you've had time to process them. But thoughtful questions interrupt impulsive behavior. They slow the conversation down. They replace emotion with accountability. And accountability is something toxic personalities usually try to avoid. That doesn't mean you ask the question with sarcasm or a smirk. Your tone matters just as much as your words. Stay calm. Stay respectful. Stay genuinely composed. Your goal isn't to embarrass them in front of others. Your goal is to make professionalism the standard everyone in the room quietly recognizes. When people realize that every disrespectful comment will be met with calm accountability instead of emotional drama, they often stop making those comments altogether because the reward they were looking for has disappeared. And that's exactly how you begin changing the culture of every interaction you're part of. 5. Magic phrase number 3. The disarming apology. At first, this final phrase may sound completely backward. Why would you apologize when someone else is treating you poorly? The answer is simple. You're not apologizing because you're guilty. You're using one of the most sophisticated communication strategies available to emotionally intelligent professionals. Here's how it works. Imagine you've been dealing with subtle hostility from the same coworker for weeks. Every conversation feels tense. Every meeting includes another passive-aggressive comment. Instead of matching their negativity, you calmly say, "I want to apologize if I've done anything that's contributed to this dynamic between us, because that's genuinely not what I want. If there's something specific that's been bothering you, I'm willing to listen." Notice what you didn't say. You didn't admit you were wrong. You didn't accept blame for their behavior. You didn't surrender your boundaries. Instead, you accepted responsibility for your part in maintaining a healthy working relationship. That's a huge difference. Emotionally mature people understand that every professional relationship involves two people. Even when you're not responsible for someone else's behavior, you're still responsible for how you choose to respond. This phrase completely disrupts the script that many toxic coworkers rely on. Bullies expect resistance. They expect defensiveness. Sometimes they even hope you'll lose your temper so they can point to your reaction instead of their own behavior. But genuine humility leaves them with very little to fight against. You've removed the emotional fuel from the conversation. Now they have a decision to make. If they truly have a legitimate concern, you've given them a safe opportunity to express it respectfully. If they don't have a real issue and they've simply been trying to intimidate you, the conversation suddenly becomes much more uncomfortable for them. Because now they're being invited to have an honest, adult discussion instead of continuing a pattern of subtle attacks. This approach also sends a powerful message to everyone watching. It says, "I'm confident enough to examine my own behavior, but I'm also confident enough not to accept unnecessary disrespect." That's a rare combination, and rare qualities earn respect. Of course, this phrase isn't appropriate in every situation. If someone is openly abusive, threatening, or engaging in serious workplace misconduct, the correct response is to document the behavior, follow company procedures, and involve the appropriate manager or human resources department. These phrases are designed for difficult interpersonal dynamics, not for situations involving harassment or policy violations. Used in the right context, however, this final phrase often accomplishes something remarkable. It transforms a confrontation into a conversation. It replaces assumptions with clarity, and it gives reasonable people one final opportunity to reset the relationship on professional terms. Sometimes that's exactly what both people needed all along. And even if the other person refuses to change, you'll walk away knowing something important. You handled yourself with integrity. No matter how someone else behaved, you never allowed them to determine the kind of professional you chose to be. 6. Your goal isn't to win, it's to change the pattern. If there's one idea I hope you remember after watching this video, it's this. You don't earn respect by winning arguments. You earn respect by setting clear expectations for how you'll be treated. That's the real purpose of these 3 phrases. They're not designed to silence people forever. They're not clever tricks to embarrass difficult coworkers. And they're certainly not weapons to use every time someone disagrees with you. They're tools for creating clarity. Clarity about your standards. Clarity about your boundaries. And clarity about the kind of professional relationship you're willing to participate in. Here's something many successful professionals eventually discover. Confidence isn't loud. It's consistent. The people who command the most respect in the workplace usually aren't the ones with the sharpest comebacks. They're the ones who stay calm under pressure. They don't rush to defend themselves. They don't chase approval. And they don't waste emotional energy trying to control other people's opinions. Instead, they control the one thing they always can, their own response. That doesn't mean every toxic coworker will suddenly become kind. Some people won't change. Some environments remain unhealthy no matter how professionally you behave. And if you've repeatedly tried to address a situation respectfully without improvement, it's perfectly reasonable to document the behavior, involve leadership, or consider whether that workplace deserves your talent at all. Professionalism doesn't mean tolerating abuse. Healthy boundaries sometimes include walking away, but in many everyday situations, changing your response changes the entire interaction. The sarcastic coworker realizes they're no longer getting a reaction. The passive-aggressive colleague discovers their comments don't create the discomfort they expected. And the people around you begin to see someone who remains composed even when others lose control. That's a reputation worth building. Because every difficult conversation is also an opportunity to practice emotional discipline, to strengthen your confidence, and to become the kind of professional people naturally trust, respect, and remember. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 3 phrases do you think would be the most effective in your workplace? Would you use the power statement, the power question, or the disarming apology? Leave your answer in the comments below. And if you've already tried a similar approach, share what happened. Your experience could help someone else who's facing the same challenge. Remember this, the next time someone tries to test your boundaries at work, stay calm, stay professional, and never confuse silence with weakness or kindness with permission. The strongest people in the room are rarely the loudest. They're the ones who know exactly when and how to speak. Every workplace has difficult personalities. You can't control who you're assigned to work with. You can't control someone's attitude, their ego, or their choice to be disrespectful. But you can always control the standard you set for yourself. And over time, that standard becomes your reputation. People may forget the details of a meeting. They may forget the exact words that were spoken. But they rarely forget the person who stayed calm when everyone else became emotional. They remember the professional who responded with confidence instead of anger. The person who protected their boundaries without sacrificing their integrity. That's the kind of presence that opens doors. It's the kind of leadership people naturally follow. And it's the kind of confidence that continues to serve you long after a single difficult conversation has ended. So the next time someone tries to pull you into unnecessary drama, remember these 3 principles. Pause before you react. Speak with calm confidence. And choose words that create accountability instead of conflict. Because real power at work isn't about proving you're stronger than someone else. It's about showing that your professionalism is stronger than their negativity. If this video gave you a practical strategy you can actually use at work, let me know by leaving a comment below with the phrase, "Professionalism wins." I'd love to see how many people are committed to building respect without becoming toxic themselves. And if you found this helpful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could use these strategies in their workplace. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.